The Nuclear Test Ban Treaty of 1963 was necessary to balance rights and advancements in our technology and science with the responsibility to prevent disasters caused by the continued use of nuclear weapons. The treaty showcased the need for the nation to guard the environment. Before discussing the main event of the Nuclear Test Ban Treaty, there's important background information to consider. Between 1945 and 1962, over 200 nuclear tests were conducted. And for some more information, a nuclear weapon is a device that relies on a nuclear reaction, while a nuclear test is just testing out that device that relies on the nuclear reaction. To continue on the 200 nuclear tests, they resulted in environmental devastation and many health risks to populations. What started these nuclear tests all over the world? To better understand, we'll look at World War II. World War II was the biggest and deadliest war in history that involved more than 30 countries in the war. Started by the 1939 Nazi invasion of Poland, the war went on for 6 deadly and bloody years. On December 7, 1941, a surprise military attack by Japan was commenced on the U.S. naval base Pearl Harbor. After this tragic attack, the U.S. hired its best physicists and engineers to create a plan to end the war with Japan because they never wanted to be involved in this world war anyway, as they believed it was their responsibility to the nation. To succeed this plan, they were going to create a bomb to end this war. This was called the Manhattan Project. The goal of the Manhattan Project was to create a nuclear weapon. In fact, scientists had the right to advance technology as they saw fit to end the deadly war. Over the course of 3 years, scientists in the secret laboratory Los Alamos were working on the goal of this nuclear weapon. How they settled with the final project was with a test called the Trinity test. It was dropped in the desert of New Mexico, which is a safe distance from Los Alamos, on July 16, 1945. The bomb was weighing at over 9,000 pounds and was very fragile, as if one wrong move could detonate the whole bomb. It was dropped by a USAAF B-29 bomber called Enola Gay. It was piloted by U.S. Army Air Force Colonel Paul Tibbets Jr. The bomb was intended to destroy and intimidate Japan's military and not to kill any citizens. After using the atomic weapon for the first time, physicist, director Los Alamos, and father of the atomic bomb, J. Robert Oppenheimer, recognized the dangers of nuclear power. He thought that nuclear waste was going to get in the atmosphere and then eventually burn the Earth. He also saw the destructive power in nuclear weapons. After using the bomb on Nagasaki and Hiroshima, the cities were in ruins. Oppenheimer stated, quote, "Now I'm becoming death, destroyer of worlds," end quote. However, once the knowledge of nuclear weapons was found, it could not be forgotten. All countries believed they had the right to have nuclear weapons. The race for nuclear weapons was seen in the Cold War. The Cold War was an ongoing political rivalry between the U.S. and the Soviet Union. As tensions continued, there was fear at all times that nuclear war would occur due to constant nuclear testings all throughout this war. The Cold War era was a period full of suspicion, as many people said, and the percentages of people saying yes to nuclear weapons in America was an exaggerating 85% in the late 1940s, while the other 15% was scared and protesting to stop the usage of nuclear weapons. This fear came to a head in October 1962 for 13 days. This was the Cuban Missile Crisis. Both sides, the Soviet Union and the United States, were having ongoing nuclear testing and creation. The U.S. wanted to put nuclear weapons in Turkey because they felt it was their responsibility to protect their allies from the Soviet Union, while the Soviets were planting them in Cuba with similar responsibilities in mind. An American U-2 spy plane secretly took photographs of nuclear missile sites being built by the Soviet Union on the island of Cuba. U.S. President John F. Kennedy did not want Cuba and the Soviet Union to find out that they had discovered their missile site. After this, he met with his advisors for several days to discuss his problem. After very long and difficult meetings, President Kennedy decided to put a ring of U.S. naval ships around Cuba. The U.S. had them surrounded. The aim of this quarantine, as the president called it, was to stop the Soviets from bringing any more military supplies to Cuba. The U.S. demanded the removal of the missiles and the destruction of the military sites. On October 22nd, President John F. Kennedy spoke to the nation in a televised address. Nobody was sure on how the Soviet leader Nikita Khrushchev was going to respond on the U.S. naval blocking on Cuba. But both of the leaders of the superpowers knew how close they were to nuclear war, and instead publicly agreed on a deal for the Soviets to dismantle the missile sites in exchange for the U.S. not to invade Cuba. In a separate deal that was held secret for more than 25 years, the U.S. would disarm their missiles from Turkey. Although the Soviets dismantled their missile sites, they improved on their military bases. And there the missile crisis was over, but the arms race was not. By the late 1950s, pressure from the citizens, scientists, and world leaders mounted to reduce nuclear weapons creation and testing. The effect of the nuclear testing on both the environment and human health were becoming undeniable. From cancer risk to radioactive fallout, the consequences that humanity may have to pay for these nuclear testings were seeming very clear. Overall, showing that the rights in advancing technology were not more important than the citizens' right to safety. Many international voices were raised in favor of banning nuclear testing all around the world. In 1954, the first formal calls for a serious ban on nuclear testing were made by the United Nations, but it wasn't until the early 1960s that serious negotiations began between the superpowers. As the world realized they were on the brink of nuclear war, the United States and the Soviet Union recognized their responsibility in curbing nuclear weapon creation.
For years, nations debated and negotiated how they would take responsibility for the limitation off. In 1963, after years of tense negotiation, the United States, the Soviet Union, and the United Kingdom reached an agreement that would end the chaos that was caused by nuclear weapons. On August 5, 1963, U.S. Secretary Dean Rusk, Soviet Foreign Minister Andrei Gromyko, and British Foreign Secretary Lord Home all signed the treaty known as the Partial Nuclear Test Ban Treaty in Moscow, Russia. This treaty banned all testing in the atmosphere and the outer sphere and underwater, banning all areas where fallout was particularly harmful, but the treaty did not limit the testing underground as long as no radioactive debris falls out of the boundaries where the nation does not allow underground tests. President John F. Kennedy called the treaty a step toward peace, emphasizing its importance in the global effort to reduce the threat of nuclear war. The Partition Treaty was a big moment in the Cold War, marking the first time the superpowers agreed to limit their nuclear activities in a significant way. The only thing was it didn't end all the nuclear testing. It was a very critical toward to de-escalation of the use and testing of nuclear weapons all around the world, hoping to end all grief. Right after the treaty was signed, countries all around the world celebrated. The Partial Treaty was a symbol of cooperation between the two superpowers, offering hope the new era of global peace might be possible. Even today, the treaty was so very important to people all around the world that they made an anniversary for the signing of the treaty. In 2023, the people celebrated the 60th anniversary of the test ban, and people felt as though their rights and safety was given back to them. However, the treaty only banned certain tests. Underground tests were still allowed. There had been 1,528 underground nuclear tests, and out of those 1,528, the U.S. had tested 815 nuclear tests. The full elimination of nuclear weapons still seemed a distant goal. Over the decades, the treaty laid a groundwork for further arms control agreements. In September 1996, the Comprehensive Nuclear Test Ban Treaty (CTBT) was introduced. The treaty was open for signing and aiming for a full ban on nuclear testing all around the world. The CTBT had been signed by 187 nations and fully ratified by 178. Yet even though this treaty tried to improve the Partial Nuclear Test Ban Treaty of 1963, the nuclear weapons had continued to be a concern today. However, the responsibility of ending nuclear testing and weapons has not been achieved. The Partial Nuclear Test Ban Treaty of 1963 still had a very big impact on today's world, and it still remains an essential step in the long disarmament struggle and returning citizens' right to a world without fear of nuclear war.
Overall, the Nuclear Test Ban Treaty of 1963 was necessary to balance rights and advancements in technology and science with the responsibility to prevent disasters caused by the continued use of nuclear weapons. The treaty showcased the need for nations to guard their environment and their citizens from nuclear weapons and technology. However, even today, the struggle with balancing these rights and responsibilities still remains today.